or this particular session here is brought to us from near Gympie, and we have Aimee and James Thomas, who have a macadamia plantation, and they are going to discuss with us about what goes on the macadamia plantation. I find that really fascinating because I know absolutely nothing about macadamias apart from the fact I absolutely love them. So can you welcome Aimee and James today, and I'll leave it over to them. And later on we'll have time for questions. So if you do have any questions along the way, please put it in your in the chat area, and please make sure that you keep your microphone and your videos off, just to help with the process of the video. Over to you guys.
Hello, and thank you, and welcome to our orchard here in Gympie. We are called Macadamias at Falkirk Farm, and we have just over 8,500 macadamia trees on our farm. We bought our farm about 7 years ago, and it's been a wonderful lesson to us on how to grow these wonderful macadamia nuts. And our season actually kicks off in around August, September, when our macadamia trees, which I think I should just be able to show you some of our trees here that we have on our farm. So August, September, they start flowering and they push out little buds and grow a beautiful little flower. And we look after those flowers, and we actually look after those flowers by introducing honeybees and native bees to our orchard. So it's a very buzzy time of the year with lots of bees buzzing around, helping pollinate our flowers. And after pollination, the flowers set little nutlets, and they're baby tiny little nutlets, and that's where they actually start growing the macadamia nuts set. So we've actually got nuts growing on the trees, which I can just show you. You can see, hopefully you can see our little nuts growing on the trees. Inside those green husk, if you can, I'll just show. So this is a green husk that protects the little nut that's growing inside of it. So there's a little baby kernel in there, and our job as nut farmers are to look after each and every nut on the trees and to make sure that we keep the trees really happy so that they can grow really good nuts that are really yummy to eat at the end. So the way that we do that, and this is what we're doing right at the moment, because it hasn't rained here for quite some time, so we are really happy and give them the drink that they need to keep growing the nuts. So we have to make sure that we keep our grass short in between our tree rows to keep the trees happy. And once we so the nuts keep growing on the trees right through until about February, March. And then in February and March, they actually have finished. So the tree has done everything that it can to make that nut kernel. The tree decides, we actually don't harvest the nuts off the tree. We actually have to wait for the tree to decide to drop the nut on the ground, and we come along and harvest the nut off the ground with a special harvester head. Do you have a photo? It's a really busy time of the year for us, up off the ground into a bin, and then we actually bring the bins back to a shed on the farm. And here I just got a picture of the harvester. I hope that you can see that with all the glare from the sun. So you can see it's a wild looking contraption. It's attached to a tractor. And if you can see the wheels at the very front of the tractor, they roll along the ground and the nuts get caught. So the nuts that are fallen on the ground get caught in between the fingers of the wheels, and that's what actually picks the nut up off the ground. And then we put that up, and then it's shot up into a bin behind the tractor, and then that's what we are then able to tip the farm, where we actually have to run it through the shed in a special lot of equipment and a piece of machinery called a dehusker. And what the dehusker does is it takes the green husk off the nut and then leaves it with the brown shell. Can you just go grab me a brown shell to show, James? Which is a brown shell. And inside that shell, so that's the green husk. Inside is a shell, and that's really, really hard, that shell. And it's what really helps protect the nut, well, the little nut inside it, from getting any damage or getting any water on it. And that's how they've been designed. So I'll just come over this way to show you. Currently, right at the moment, we are mulching in underneath the trees. So while the nuts are growing, we want to try and keep our soil as healthy as possible so that it keeps the tree at various times of the year drops their leaves. And I'll just see if I can just show you some here. So we've got these. So all that beautiful mulch is what helps to keep the trees really happy and healthy. And so we use this machine called a mulcher, and I've got it just right here, which I'm hoping to show you, and it's on the back of a tractor. So we only use little tractors here in our orchard because the branches are growing over in them, and we can't really get big tractors up through the middle of the tree rows. So we actually use special tractors with special bars to help protect them from the branches and the leaves, and making sure that they stay safe and we stay safe inside of them. And then we've got a mulcher here on the back of a tree. Just help me see if that's showing. It's really hard. Sorry, it's really hard with the glare, but I'm hoping to show you the mulcher. James, I don't know. My husband, James, who I farm here with, is going to jump in the tractor, hoping to give you a bit of a demonstration on moving the mulch in underneath the tree, because it's really important. What? Sorry about that. It's really important that we get our machinery right in underneath the tree to mulch up all the leaves to create all the goodness for the trees and for the growing nuts. So this is what we call a mulcher on the back of the tractor. And my husband's going to lift it up, and it's going to slide across, right across into lots of little pieces, and then that's what helps to keep our soil really healthy, and that's what keeps our tree really healthy. So I mentioned nozzles. We use little sprinklers, spray out water sometimes we actually put a bit of fertilizer in that water, and that's called fertigation. And we fertigate some nutrients on that the trees need to keep growing strong and healthy nuts. So once the tree has finished growing all its nuts, and I think I showed you before the green husk in the tree, I'll just show you. We have a special nutcracker that we use. So we walk along through the orchard picking up nuts that have dropped off the ground to check whether or not that they're mature. And when they're mature, they'll actually have a level of oil in them. And when we know that they're mature, you can just rub your fingers, you get the nut and you rub it on a piece of white paper. And if there's a little smudge of oil on the paper, you know that it's a mature nut. And that's our sign to know that they're ready to harvest. So I actually got some bags of nuts just here with all our macadamias that we have grown last year. And I'll just open them and we'll crack a couple open to show you what's inside the brown shell.
Aimee, that place that you're at right now, we can hear you clearly and see you clearly because it's been a bit, the connection hasn't been too good, but where you are now seems to be pretty good.
Okay, so I'll stay here?
Yes, that'll be good.
Okay, so we're just cracking some nuts to show you. So there's the little kernel. The nice macadamia looks nice and crunchy inside the brown shell that we use a nutcracker to crack out. Super easy. It's the best way to eat them. And then we've left with the, I hope you can see that, the macadamias. Yum, yum. So after we finished harvesting our nuts in March, right through to August, so it's a really long harvest period for us, but that's because we've got to wait for the trees to decide to finish dropping all their nuts. So in that time while we're harvesting, we take them back to our shed, like I said, and we take the green husk off. We're left with the brown shell. We put them into big silos where we store them. We actually have to run air over them to keep them nice and cool, because if their nuts get too hot, they can go yucky. No good. So once we get a silo full of nuts, we are then able to call a truck, and we actually sell our nuts processors here in Australia who take all the nuts in the shell, and their job is to crack the nut and leave just that white kernel that I showed you. So they have big cracking machines that they run all their nuts through, and it separates the shell. It cracks the shell, which is really, really hard, and that's why we needed to use a nutcracker to open it. You cannot open them without anything. They are super, super hard. So once they're cracked, they take the shell away, and that leaves them with the kernel. And from there, that's where they're then packaged up and sold to all over Australia and even all around the world. I actually think 70% of the Australian macadamia crop is exported overseas. And so they're sold to places like Japan and Taiwan, Korea, China, Europe. All places through Europe love macadamias, and America. And it's a growing market. The world has only just discovered how yummy macadamias are. So more and more macadamias are getting sent all over the world. And they are turned, so people buy the macadamias. The macadamia nut is a really great nut that can be either added
We can't hear you, Aimee.
Sorry.
Bit windy there.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's good. That's better.
Okay, I will stay here. So I was just explaining about chocolate coated macadamia nuts and how lovely they are dipped in chocolate. So they get the nice white kernel and they dip them in chocolate and then they make them into a nice little round ball, and that's one way people love eating them. But then macadamias are also beautiful, coated in just sea salt, and there's lots more flavors being developed at the moment. So some of the favorites that we've had are hickory, which is like a barbecue flavored macadamia nut, or salt. They're even putting salt and vinegar on the macadamia nuts. Wasabi. Wasabi is a Japanese flavor, and so you can just eat them like that. But then we've also lots of macadamia nuts are being sold to go into lots of other ingredients, like there's cookies, mueslis, muesli bars, ice cream. Macadamia milk is actually something that's becoming very popular, where they actually get the macadamias and they turn them into a milk so that you can have it on your breakfast cereal or in your coffee. Macadamia butter would have to be one of my favorites, which is a little bit like a texture of peanut butter, and it's like peanut butter but only better because it's using macadamias, and I love having that on toast in the morning. And another family favorite that we like is Macadamia Pesto, where you whiz it up like you do with normal pesto, but you use macadamia nuts with the basil. And I don't know, they're actually really nice just on a nice salad, or, and you just toss a couple of macadamia nuts through them. So there's lots and lots of ways that macadamias are being used in cooking. What else can we
or maybe
tell you about?
Questions. We may have some questions from our participants about macadamias. If you've got any questions, please put it in the chat area. I've got a few questions, but we'll
I'll just wait for some questions. Okay.
Any questions there? No questions at the moment. I'll ask a question. So, in terms of where are most of the macadamias grown in Australia? Are they grown?
That's a really good question.
Mainly
the
in your area?
macadamias are actually hope I haven't dropped out. No. They're actually a rainforest plant. Have you got me?
Yes.
Yes. Hey, they're a rainforest plant, so they actually really like temperatures and climates that are similar to a rainforest. So here in Australia, they're growing in New South Wales on the coastline, northern New South Wales, and then they've grown all the way up to central Queensland, but mostly on the coastlines because they need a level of moisture and humidity. They don't really like dry and hot for too long. And also they need the soils of the coastline soils to make sure that they can grow in as well. They are also growing in other parts of the world. There's orchards over in South Africa. There are orchards in Hawaii. There are orchards in China and Vietnam. And I think there might be a couple of orchards in Brazil, but there's not too many. Most of the orchards are, well, most of the macadamias are growing here in Australia and South Africa.
Wonderful. We've got a couple of questions here. How many kilos of nuts per tree on average? I assume that's per year. How many kilos of nuts per tree on average?
Okay, yeah, great question. That can vary from year to year, but on average, a tree around 7 years old, it's a tree planted in the ground is only starting to produce nuts from around 5 or 7 years of age, and at that point in time they can keep producing nuts right up until they're about 40 years old. So on average, an average size tree of an average age, say 10 years, would probably produce somewhere between, we get some really great varieties who produce a lot more than that. So probably the top, some of our really good trees have actually produced up to 30 kilos and sometimes 40 kilos, which is a lot of kilos for one tree.
Fantastic. Another question. Is your farm run solely by your family, or do you employ other people to help with harvest, etc.?
That's a really good question too. So we are a family-owned family. I actually have farms, and we have 4 boys who are 14, 12, 10 and 8. So we encourage them to help on the farm as much as possible. Sometimes that's not always the case. They help out with things like irrigating and a little bit of mowing, and then I get them to help me in the shed at harvest time. But when they're at school, we do need to get other people in. So we have two other people that help us drive tractors and help my husband with all the machinery work. And then at harvest time, I sometimes get some people in to help me in the shed as well when we've got lots of nuts to harvest and to get through. So we have a great team here at Falkirk Farm to help us grow all these nuts.
Fantastic. So how many kilos so how many tons or kilos of nuts do you pick every year? And the other question is, what is the profit margin?
Well, that's a really good question too. I'll let my husband think on the profit margin, but while he's having a think, yeah, so depending on the season, and to be honest, we've had a really tough season this year just gone past because it just stopped raining for a very long time and we were actually suffering from a bit of drought. But in a normal year, when we get good rainfall all through the growing season and everything sort of lines up, here on our farm, we roughly produce around 150 to 180 tonnes of macadamia nuts. And it keeps us very busy in those years. In terms of...
On average, the profit margins are, you might get something around $30,000 a hectare for your product, and it costs us around somewhere in the vicinity of $8,000 to $10,000 a hectare to produce them. So that can differ each year. As well as the nuts we actually get paid for the nuts.
Yeah, so just on that, at the moment, the price of macadamias for of what we sell at the farm is really good because at the moment we cannot produce enough nuts for the demand. So the supply and demand ratio is really good at the moment. So therefore, the price here at a farm gate price is really good.
Fantastic. That's a really great question and response. And another question, what are your major challenges towards sustainable production? And I'm not sure if sustainability is just purely about sustaining the environment or just being sustainable as a business.
Yep, really good question. So probably like I've touched on already, water as a resource is probably our biggest challenge. When it doesn't rain, when we need it to rain, we need to be able to give the trees a drink of water and keep them happy and keep them growing the nuts. And then unfortunately, when our water sources start to get really low, water becomes our biggest critical issue to make sure that we can give the trees enough water. We take the art and craft of growing macadamias responsibly really serious here at Falkirk Farm. So we to the environment. So we do have to look after our precious little nuts because there's some lovely little bugs that like to come and sting them. And when they do sting them, they fall off and they become a bad nut. So we do have to protect them, and we try and do that through many different ways. We actually release insects all through and around the orchard. And those insects are little wasps. And the little wasps find the eggs of the bad bugs and they sting them. And they actually lay their eggs into the bad bug egg, and it grows its egg, it grows its baby in there instead. So they are called
parasitic wasps.
An Anastasis wasp. That's actually one of my jobs that I have given to one of my sons. He gets around on his little motorbike and he goes and staples the cards to the tree leaves all around the orchard, and the eggs hatch out and do them. Those little wasps go and do their magic. So we do have to spray our orchard from time to time to protect the nuts from disease and other pests. So we do that in the most safest way possible, and we try and keep that to a minimum so that we're looking after the environment that way. What else do we do?
You use a lot of mulch.
We do. We actually buy in and spread a lot of mulch to put in underneath the trees to really conserve the moisture and to really look after the trees nutritionally. So we really monitor the nutrition of the tree, and we only apply what we need to apply to keep that tree happening. So for example, we have to apply a lot of calcium to our soils and to our trees to keep all those nutrition ratios right. And yeah, we use a lot of compost to do that.
Fantastic. The next question is, what modern technology do you use on the farm?
Good question. And this is probably something that my husband is getting into a lot more, because, you know, through the use of some good technology, it saves us a lot of time and it helps us do a lot of recording so we can track a lot of things. So we've actually just got onto a new app called Farmable. And this app we can use on our phone, and we can drive all through the orchard and we can use it and we can take photos with it. We can actually use it to track our tractors and the machinery in the orchard. And it just helps us to identify if there's the broken irrigation pipe, we can record it and pass that on to somebody who can go then and fix it.
Yeah, just delegate jobs to staff without having to waste time tracking people down and getting lost in a paper trail.
So yeah, and it's really cool because it's all done through the satellite, through GPS. So we can actually get onto the app and we can see a tractor driving in the orchard and it will track it all the way through. So that's really cool. We actually don't use it, but when the macadamia orchards get planted right in the very beginning, we have to use GPS tractors, so they have to be automatically driven in a straight line so that we can ensure each tree is planted exactly where it needs to be, and that just helps for managing those orchards down the track.
Wonderful. Another question, what made you start farming macadamias?
Well, besides the fact that we love eating them, that was a big attraction. But look, for us, it was a really great location for us where the orchard was here in Gympie. It was near family for us, so it was a great location to farm. We knew we wanted to farm. We knew we loved the idea of living on some land and having a bit of space around us, and we both come from a background of farming, so we had the right skills to apply. And I think in terms of macadamias, it's just a wonderful product to grow, knowing that it's really healthy for people and it's really nutritious, and you can use macadamias in so many different ways. And we just felt like it was a really great crop to invest into, because we really believe it's got a great future to keep providing great food for our communities.
Fantastic. Do we have any more questions? looks like we don't have. So do most of the macadamias produced in Australia end up overseas?
Not all of them. I think that the current figures is about 70% of what's grown here in Australia does go overseas. I'd love to see more Aussies eating macadamias, because I just saw a question that came through, where do they originate from?
Mm-hmm.
And they are native to Australia. They are actually a bush food that the Aboriginals used to feast on when they came across them in the bush. So they are true essential bush. And when the macadamias were coming, so this mother tree, where the nuts were collected up from the mother tree just not too far from where our orchard is, and they were actually taken all the way over to Hawaii, believe it or not. And the Hawaiians commercialized them. So they worked out how to grow them at a commercial level. And then and that's where the industry started in varieties. And that was probably about 60 years ago. But since then, us Aussies have worked out, well, hey, come on, they're native to Australia. So we've now actually got some really good they're called A varieties, which are Australian varieties. And so they're probably considered the true essential Australian varieties. But throughout the industry, there's all different types of macadamias with all the different varieties, and yeah.
Fantastic. And Alicia is asking a question that I was going to ask. Do you value add the macadamias yourself?
Oh, look, I would actually love to be able to do that, but it does take a level of time. And to be honest, our macadamia orchard keeps us both pretty busy, making sure that we grow really healthy nuts for everybody. We do sell them at a farm gate, because we do believe that one of the best ways to eat them is just fresh, straight out of the shell. So we started an online shop, and really wanted to be able to provide our macadamias all across Australia. So we started an online shop, and we sourced a really good nut cracker, which I think I showed you before when we were cracking the nuts. And it's just so easy. So we sell that nut cracker with our nuts online. And yeah, that as far as coating them in chocolate, or no, we just do that for our own personal eating.
Very good. Another question from Libby. Do you think your sons will want to take over the farm when you get older?
Oh, look, that is a really good question, and it's a hard one to answer, because who knows, but they have shown an interest, and I think my eldest son might become a pilot, so he might be responsible for flying them to different places. But in terms of the growing, at the moment, they're just really happy working on the farm, learning how to work hard, and learning how to grow things, and just being amongst it. But yeah, not sure. We'll have to see about that one.
Very good. Any more questions? So if a young person was interested in working in your industry, how would they go about getting involved with like accessing a macadamia producer? Is there a group, an industry group that young people and schools can contact?
Yes, there is actually. We have a fantastic group called the Australian Macadamia Society, and they are located down in New South Wales. They have an office down there, but they have a really, really good website, and there's a lot of information that you can get off their website, all through the macadamia chain supply, right through from growing macadamias, right through to processing and cracking the macadamias, and then even all the research that goes into growing the macadamias. So, and there's lots of consultancy businesses that help farmers look after the macadamias. And that's all that information is on the website, and it's probably one of the best resources to tap into and find out what you're looking for.
Fantastic. I've got one other question. The shells, like once the nut is cracked and you've got the shell, what's that used for? Does it get ground up and turned into something, or what happens to it? Because there's no doubt lots and lots of them.
Yes, that's a really good question. I think my husband knows a bit about that.
Yeah, so the nut and shell, usually about 50 to 60% of the nut itself, only 30 to 40% of that is actually kernel. So the rest of it is the shell. So there are some people experimenting with stock feed because they are high energy, but primarily the use is used for, they use it as a heat source for in lime plants to do hydrated lime. They use it as a alternative coal or fire source. Its energy units are actually only 1 joule lower than basic coal grade. So it burns very hot and it burns for a long time. So that's what they're using the shell for. And we use it in our fire, in our wood fires in winter. And when we add them, it puts about an extra 40 degrees inside the firebox.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I never even knew that. That's sensational. There you go. It's using every part of the product in a sustainable way.
Yeah. So when you heard Aimee talk about the dehusking of the nut, which is taking off the green fibrous part offside. So most of the orchardists, we put it back in our orchard and we compost it. So then it also becomes part of our compost program. So it goes back under the trees as a nutrition, as part of our nutrition program. So we might end up ourselves with 50 or 60 tonne of extra organic matter to go back under the trees.
That's fantastic.
And the trees love it. It breaks down really quickly, and you can see the trees to help feed the trees.
Alicia's asked for your email address. Alicia, I can share that with you. And your website, your macadamia website is, what's the address, Aimee?
Yes, it's www.macadamiasonline.com.au. And on there, it's got some really great photos of how we do things here on farm and of the boys doing some things on the farm. So please jump on and have a look, and it tells you our story of why we bought the farm and how we farm it. So yeah, it's a great little site, as well as our macadamia nuts.
Oh, it's fantastic. What a great industry, and what a great story that you've given us today. It's sensational. Does anyone have any more questions for Aimee and James today? I know about you.
Could I just add a little bit of interesting information on the macadamia?
Yes, that'd be great.
Yes. So there's I'm sure we're mostly aware of the Wallamai pine down near Sydney. So there's a subspecies of macadamia called the Macadamia jansenii, and it is the rarest native plant in Australia. It's rarer than the Wallamai pine. There's actually only 16 plants documented in Australia, and they are as older than the Wallamai pine.
And I could probably add a little bit to that story, in that there's a new group called the Macadamia Conservation Trust, and they're a group of avid macadamia advocates who are really all about protecting the wild species of macadamias here in Australia. And they also have a website, Macadamias Conservation Trust, and there's some wonderful information about all the wild macadamias that you have here in Australia and what wonderful work they're doing to conserve and preserve them.
Fantastic. We have another question. Do you have any livestock on your farm, or is it just the nuts that you farm?
Yeah, the nuts are primarily our main enterprise. We do have stock for our own use. We are going into running some cattle in our country where we've got plenty of grass. But the byproducts that we have out of our processing plants, we have a small herd of pigs, a small mob of pigs, and we feed all our byproducts to the pigs. And the pigs love them. They can crack the nuts open in their mouth, and yeah, they do really well out of it, and they make very good bacon too.
I'm sure.
There's no waste. There's no waste here at Falkirk Farm. Every last nut is used.
That's fantastic. All right. Any last questions? Well, it's been very, very fascinating today to learn about your world and about macadamias, things that I never knew, and certainly have learnt a great deal today. And I can tell that our participants have too. So personally, I'd like to thank both of you for coming on board. We only signed you up a couple of days ago, and very grateful that you're able to be part of today and about National Ag Day and our farmer time activities, which happen all year round, but this was our special one for National Ag Day. So I want to thank you both, and I also like to thank our participants for joining us today for our farmer time session. And I'm sure that we've all learned something new today. So thank you both for joining us today, and thanks to everyone for joining into the session. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Very much.
Keep eating Maccas.
Indeed. Thanks a lot.